Welcome back to part 2 of Vinyl Finds 2025. Here a bit more diversity in the genre and titles from the last video. We start off with Flesh and Machine. This is a 2014 issue from Daniel Lanois on the Anti label. The music could be described as ambient, deeply processed steel guitar and electric guitar, piano and human voice, a beautiful palette, angular and dynamic. The track My First Love on side B is one of my favorite tunes from Lanois, equal parts early rock and roll and seemingly doo-wop and gospel inspired, a short and sweet piece that is a highlight of this collection of music. Next is the Dutch-based Scottish-born musician Jonny Nash with his 2023 album Point of Entry. I did a deep review of his new record on my Substack, which I'll link below if you're interested. This music is quiet and heartfelt, resembling some of the more somber passages from the Rudy column. This sort of crude and plaintive artwork here is an exact representation of how this music feels. Colorful, hazy, dreamlike, spare and beautiful. Full of reverb and chorus-laden electric guitars, with the human voice coming in and out of the compositions as another instrument. This is mesmerizing and meditative music, highly recommended for a late evening or an early morning listen. Next is Def Center's Reverie. This is a 2-track LP released by Sonic Pieces, here on limited edition brick red vinyl. This was recorded in 2024 at a studio in Berlin on a live improvised session and released this past May 2025. Def Center is a duo from Norway featuring Erik Skadven and Otto Totland, a mixture of dark ambient soundscapes, samples, and cello from Skadven, with Totland contributing poignant, sparse piano. Def Center is some of my favorite music of the dark ambient genres, highly recommended for fans of William Basinski, Callie Malone, and that ilk of music. Next is Therapy. This is a self-release from the Brendan Eder Ensemble. Brendan is a jazz drummer, composer, and arranger based in Los Angeles. Therapy from 2023 is a pure acoustic ambient album, even covering 2 songs from the Aphex Twin Selected Ambient Works Volume 2, number 3 and number 17. This music is purely woodwinds, flutes, clarinets, beautiful, hypnotic, and mesmerizing music. Highly recommended. Moving into the jazz world, this is a 2021 reissue, remaster, repress, stereo on 180 gram, Chet Baker's Chet. These are soft, sultry ballads, wise, spacious recordings, with the beautiful lyrical trumpet of Chet Baker, Pepper Adams on Barry, Paul Chambers on bass, Herbie Mann on flute, Kenny Burrell on guitar. Bill Evans also graces these recordings on piano. I have an early 90s Analog Productions 33 cut of the same music. I A-B'd the 2 in a shootout. I would say this new remaster is a touch louder, a bit sharper on the edges, with the Analog Productions 90 cut being a touch more soft around the edges with a bit more air. Both equally beautiful recordings and pressings. This is lush romantic music, a must for any jazz collection. Likely my favorite of the jazz reissue labels, this is the new OJC reissue of the incredible jazz guitar of Wes Montgomery. When I first started listening to jazz, being a guitarist myself, I gravitated toward Wes and this recording in particular. I first had an 80s OJC cut by Phil DeLancey, which was good enough, but this new remaster and reissue is sonically superior. The vinyl is quieter, the blacks are darker. Wes's crystalline guitar shines like a shimmering tapestry over the landscape. This was cut from the original tapes by Kevin Gray at Coherent and pressed at RTI, housed in this thick Stoughton jacket. I would say this is the definitive pressing of this record, unless you can find an original pressing in clean condition. Highly recommended for fans of jazz guitar. Another recent reissue from the OJC series is the Bill Evans Trio Moonbeams. This is the first recording of the trio music with Chuck Israels on bass after Scott LaFaro's untimely passing. Of the early trio music from Bill Evans, this perhaps is my favorite musically, with the repertoire on this title being a bit more subdued. Regarding Person I Knew is the opening cut on side A, a composition by Evans which I believe is an homage to the late LaFaro. This was originally recorded in New York City in June of 1962, released this past May by Kraft and OJC. Just before the filming of this video in early August 2025, Analog Productions announced the UHQR pressing of Art Pepper Meets the Rhythm section. Here is the 2023 Acoustic Sounds Contemporary Series version of this record. One peculiar thing is the artwork on this is very blurry. I think they must have used an upsampled low-resolution version of this cover art. A couple years ago for Record Store Day, a mono cut of this title was also done by Contemporary. Similarly to the Chet Baker I showed earlier, I also have an early 90s press from Analog Productions of this title. The same attributes hold true between the two. The earlier 90s AP cut is a bit more airy, more spacious, a bit softer around the edges. Here Pepper is joined by this beautiful rhythm section of Paul Chambers on bass, Philly Joe Jones on drums, and Red Garland on piano, recorded by Roy Dunan, originally released by Contemporary in 1957. Here's an extremely rare Intro Records reissue, which is part of the Blue Note Tone Poet series. This is a mono-cut 180 gram, released this past April 2025, Art Pepper Quartet's Modern Art. Clean original copies of this album go for huge money, so this seemingly affordable reissue is more than welcome. Definitive West Coast jazz, recorded in Los Angeles in 1957. Onto an unexpected hit of Serge Chaloff's Blue Surge, my favorite tone poet of the year, and in the top 2 or 3 titles from that series. Absolutely magnificent performance and a beautiful pressing. I was originally drawn to this for the cover. I'd never heard the music. This is a mono 180 gram cut, released June of 2025 from the original 1956 recording on Capitol Records. Serge on baritone sax is joined by Leroy Vinegar on bass, Philly Joe Jones on drums with Sonny Clark on piano. The reissue, like all the tone poets, being cut from the original tapes by Kevin Gray at Coherent. This is immaculate mid-50s jazz at its finest, highly recommended for general jazz fans, very accessible and easy to get into. As most of you know, the Pablo records are diamonds in the rough. You can find these all day in used bins around the US from $5 to $10. Most of the recordings are digital, but are captured so dynamically and so hot, the music is electric and vibrant. Outside of the musical content alone, the Pablo editions are superior in their sonics. Here is a translucent red vinyl pressing of Warm Breeze by Count Basie and his orchestra, released in 1981. The repertoire being pieces mostly composed by Sam Nestico, with the final track Satin Doll, the classic from Strayhorn and Ellington. The sleeve condition is very good, but the album cleaned up nice to a VG++. This was found for $10 at my favorite record shop, Flowering Spikes in Thousand Oaks, California. Another one from Flowering Spikes is the 1984 OJC reissue of the Paul Desmond Quartet featuring Don Elliot. This was originally recorded at the Black Hawk in San Francisco in February 1956 on the Fantasy label. This was an album and a release that I was not familiar with. A blind buy for $10 at Flowering Spikes is well worth the price. Next, an original stereo pressing of Oscar Peterson and Nelson Riddle, 1964 Verve Records. I'm a huge fan of Nelson Riddle's arrangements, and of course Oscar Peterson is a wizard on the piano. This music reminds me of an early, clear summer morning. Very relaxed, very easy, so engaging and alive. I found this original pressing on Discogs listed as near mint. It arrived with several significant scratches on it. After a few cleanings it turned out okay, just a few minimal pops and ticks, and some light surface noise between tracks. Here Nelson Riddle doing the arrangements with the classic Oscar Peterson trio, with Ed Thigpen on drums and Ray Brown on bass. Speaker's Corner also did an all-analog reissue of this title, which is seemingly impossible to find in the US. This is sort of a sleeper hit that I highly recommend. Moving into some classical titles, this is a 1997 Classic Records reissue cut by Bernie Grundman. Here music from Rachmaninoff and Rimsky-Korsakoff, conducted by Sir Adrian Bolt with the LSO. This was still sealed in the shrink from Dominic at Commonwealth, who had recently bought a classical collection. I absolutely love this dark still life image donning the cover. This is the RCA Living Stereo catalog number 2185, one of the titles that Analog Productions did not include in their series. This music was recorded in London and originally released in 1958. Another title from Dominic's collection was this Classic Records reissue of Elgar and Brahms, with Monteau conducting the LSO. This is the Enigma Variations and Haydn Variations, with the heralded Kenneth Wilkinson engineering at Kingsway Hall. This was remastered from the original tapes by Bernie Grundman in Los Angeles and pressed by Classic Records, the original recording taking place in 1960. I'm a huge fan of Elgar's compositions, with this being a magnificent version of the Enigma Variations. Again, another classic title that was not included in Chad's RCA Living Stereo series for Analog Productions. Onto a handful of titles from the Testament reissue series, one of the top-tier sleeper reissue series for classical music. This is music from Mozart and Prokofiev, played by the virtuosic violinist David Oistrakh. This is an all-analog, remastered reissue, stereo 180-gram title from 2002 from Testament, with the music originally being released in 1959, catalog number SAX 2304. Onto another Testament EMI reissue, SAX 2315. This is music from Beethoven, again played by the masterful Oistrakh on violin with the French National Radio Orchestra. Originally released again in 1959. Oistrakh's playing is masterful. He has such a command over his instrument. His playing is so confident and strident, yet relaxed at the same time. This is highly recommended for fans of violin music. An absolutely incredible performance and a beautiful reissue. Last from our man Oistrakh, this is a compilation of violin-centric music from the Columbia SAX 2253, again, a stereo all-analog reissue from Testament. I AB'd this with the electric recording company from a friend and found on both pressings the same issue. There's a deep whoosh on the end of side A, lots of surface noise. The tapes must have been damaged from those reissue cuts, which is sad because the music is nothing short of miraculous. As far as I know, this reissue is still available at Acoustic Sounds. Unless you can find a clean copy of an original from 1956, I'm afraid this is probably the best this album can ever sound. Last from the Testament reissues, this is the 1964 HMV reissue of Bruckner's Symphony 8, conducted by Carl Schuricht with the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra. This is a double album housed in 2 separate jackets, limited edition, numbered issue from 2020. This is only the second or third piece of music I own from Bruckner, one I was unfamiliar with. This is a wonderful performance and a gorgeous pressing. Most of the Testament reissue titles are sold out at Acoustic Sounds and other places online in the US. If you happen to live in the UK or EU, I know the Testament website in the UK has a lot of the titles still in stock. As Pablo is to the jazz world, so is Argo to the classical world. Most of the titles ranging between $5 and $20 in any used bin across the country. The jackets are thin and glossy and usually beat up and bent, but the vinyl is usually VG+. These are substantial pressings of beautiful music that are often overlooked. Here we have Fantasia on a Theme by Thomas Tallis, Fantasia on Green Sleeves, and other pieces composed by Vaughan Williams with the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields directed by Neville Mariner. If you've watched some of my earlier videos, you know I adore this orchestra and conductor combination. With Fantasia on a Theme by Thomas Tallis being one of my favorite pieces of classical music. Highly recommended to seek out these Argo pressings if you can. Absolutely an unsung label full of gorgeous music. Thanks so much for following along, and please follow along on my Substack for in-depth reviews, interviews, playlists, and more music-related content.